You know, I have to tell everyone watching the videos, I do a podcast. I mean, this is the Motive podcast. But all of my podcasts I generally do with somebody else. So the video is more relevant. Doing these solo like this is a little difficult. For one, I got to make some little notes as I go along these, which I can do when I have a guest or a co-host. When it's just me, you see it. So you're really watching a live podcast recording, though, as I'm doing it solo, and we do the videos now and people like those. I'll try to do justice to just being a talking head here, but bear with me as you see me make a pause here and there to make a note, or the fact that I'm not just candidly talking and riffing from the bare necessities of my mind. I'm not that good. I write everything I do, at least notes, if not really write it out. So I am writing, reading, and ad-libbing as we go. So I'm going to start my podcast recording and take off. And this is episode 9 of the Motive podcast. Well, hey, everyone. I'm Kevin Miller. This is episode 9 of the Motive podcast, and I'm covering the relationships we have with our own lives and the 7 areas we find fulfillment in, which I covered in episode 7. So in episode 7, I talked about here are the areas we generally find fulfillment in and why. So I talked about the value. I'm going to try not to reiterate that here, but generally talk about the relationships we have because they impacted them to such a huge degree. I mean, relationship as a word, it depicts the way in which 2 or more concepts or objects are connected. Aside from people in our lives and, actual human relationships, or even with an animal, we will occasionally hear people talk about the relationships that they have with food or self-image. For instance, as often people have an unhealthy relationship with themselves in these areas, and they know how that can negatively affect them. We, in fact, have a relationship, good or bad, with everything in our lives. In a true story here, my friend, business partner, co-host of the True Life podcast, Randy James, he says we have a relationship with everything, and wisely so. And folks watching the podcast, there's my pause because this is where we put in our little pre-roll, and I'm going to note it. So thanks for hanging out with me. I mean, regarding the 7 key areas where we seek fulfillment in our lives, again, which I covered in episode 7, we have a relationship with each, and this relationship is made up of how we feel in our emotions, and it is powerful. These relationships can negatively sabotage and undermine our efforts, or absolutely turbocharge them. So the point here is to get you aware of where you fall. Admittedly, the topic of feelings and emotions, it's not one that I inherently enjoy. I'd rather just skip that. You may as well. I get that. My mentality is naturally to ignore such things and simply focus on the objective ahead, right? This is great Superman fodder. I mean, who has time or use for feelings when there's something ahead to conquer? I understand that. And if you're on the battlefield or a sports field or on a project deadline, that's great. But if you want to successfully direct your life toward long-term positive progress and this guiding light of fulfillment, you'll need to take heed of your deeper thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions. I don't naturally even use the word feelings in my vernacular. I'll tell you my opinion and my viewpoint and start most of my statements with, I think, ... And I have to work diligently these days to strive towards starting a statement with, I feel, which for me doesn't feel good, but I'm trying to grow that part of my psyche and perspective so as to grow and progress in my humanity, ability, and peace. I'm well versed in what I think, and I want to round out my own glory in better understanding and expressing how I feel. Boy, wouldn't my wife much more like to know how I feel than how I think, usually. To bring your motives and desires into alignment, it's possible without having, or it's impossible. I'm sorry. Listen again. Let me state that again. To bring your motives and desires into alignment, it's impossible without having clarity on how you feel about the perceived objective. So we're going to start off physical wellness as our first muse. You have a relationship with how you feel about this area of your life. It may be a codependent relationship. It may be a neglectful relationship. It may be addictive and abusive. It may be glorious and inspiring, but you do have a relationship. So how do you feel, I'll ask, about your health and wellness? And first, just stop and ponder for a moment, maybe even, close your eyes or gaze out the window. I'm a window gazer. And ask yourself, is the feeling positive or negative? I mean, this alone is a telltale sign. A majority of people will feel negative thoughts such as guilt or shame or anger regarding their health and wellness. A negative feeling about the category itself is a massive saboteur for your wellness. And a positive feeling will help you overcome mountains and act as an advocate for you. Matter of fact, I just recorded True Life podcast, episode 52 with Dr. Randy James. And we talked about, he mentioned placebos, and hey, if a placebo helps, then great, more power to you. But we actually got to talking about the point of our attitude. Our attitude about something can mean as much or more than any tangible reality about something. So again, if you mainly feel all positive about your health and wellness, you're probably doing better than the average with your health and wellness. I mean, as a lifetime athlete, I've always been fairly fit and trim and strong and healthy. I have very little negative feelings about health and wellness. I was kind of a hefty kid, surprisingly so in my early years. It took me a long time not to see myself that way, but all in all, positive feelings that help me stay committed and achieving my wellness goals. And I think just being well overall. My wife is a fine physical specimen, admittedly. But while I was on the biking circuit, she was a professional performer, singing, acting, and dancing. And from an early age, she had some very influential people, actually just the whole industry really, can be a lot of body shaming. I mean, the professional dance industry specifically is rife with anorexia and bulimia, and my wife did not escape those things. Far into our marriage, she had significant struggles and didn't start healing until some significant counseling happened. But today, at 51 years old, she looks like $1 million and she's healthy and well. But she's come a long way. And where I have, my own unrest and unhealth relationally sometimes or I'm trying to overcome that, in finances and money. Terry has to really guard herself regarding her health and wellness pursuits, especially on the aesthetic side. She fights a saboteur in this area while I enjoy an advocate. So what are your feelings regarding your own health and wellness? Again, if you're joyful and inspired, good on you. Know that's an amazing asset for you. Even with that, I try to find clarity on why. It's just good to know your motive for feeling good. A good example from your parents, was that where it came from? A big success in overcoming ill health or being overweight, or great encouragement or achievements. Maybe there's someone you could even thank right now for helping you have a good attitude towards your health and wellness. But for those of you who have a negative feeling, here's some common negative feelings that can relate to any of the areas that we're covering in today's 7 areas of fulfillment. But right now, for health and wellness, consider if you resonate with these: anger, annoyance, sadness, resignation, guilt, fear, despondency, anxiety, scarcity, discouragement, animosity, despair, shame, malice, apathy, disappointment, frustration. And I'll end again with guilt, as it's a primary one. I mean, where you have negative emotions regarding any of the 7 pillars, this is what we want to take captive, as they'll forever handicap your efforts. And let me say right away, the point is not necessarily to recognize the negative feeling and say, okay, I'm going to eradicate it, right? That's what we say in personal development. You got to overcome it, which means you got to get rid of it. No fear. Long-term, that would be great. But right now, it's just to call the thing out, get it on the table so you can manage your progress around, over, or through that negative feeling. Figure out why, if you're not clear, and think through how you can help this issue. I mean, regarding exercise, let's use that as an avatar real quick. There are many people who cringe at the topic. Exercise might have been used as punishment in your childhood. They may have been, you might have been forced to do sports. Maybe you had an abusive coach that tried to literally inflict pain. I have a close friend who was trying to get into shape. He took up running. And every time we got together, he lamented about how much he hated running. Now, granted, generally, if you stick with an exercise program long enough, you will get over some of the initial toil and maybe even find some joy in it. I've seen it happen so many times, even for my kids recently. However, in episodes 7 and 29 of the True Life podcast, we talk specifically about exercise. And my co-host, Randy, Dr. James, He cites the question he's so often asked, what is the best exercise, Dr. James? And as you'll hear in those episodes, his reply is, whichever one you'll do. So that same friend I was talking about who hated running and really didn't have much joy in exercise overall, he discovered a love for fishing and realized if he chose streams and lakes that were a decent hike away, it gave him exercise without feeling like it. Man, he's just eager to get to, the lake. And afterwards, he's eager to get home to dinner. He's not thinking about the fact that he's actually hiking up steep inclines at high altitude or walking for a couple miles. He got exercise without feeling like it. My wife, my point is with that friend, he didn't overcome the fact that he doesn't really like exercise. He just found a way to do it that he did enjoy, and it encompassed exercise. My wife, she knows she's best to do group activities. She does Zumba a lot, which to her is mainly just getting with friends and having fun and talking and socializing. And she gets to dance, and she loves dancing. She feels like she's having fun. And in reality, she'll come home sometimes and go, holy smokes, I did 2 classes. I'm about to die. She had fun. She's not thinking about, she went and, buckled down self-will and discipline and exercise. I don't know that she really likes even that, the concept of exercise as being fun. I think a lot of people don't. I think people try to come off like they do. I don't know that I like exercise. I love riding my bike and I love running and being out on the trails. And I do like pushing myself. But again, the point is, even if you have a negative feeling, you don't have to overcome it. Just figure out how to get past it, reframe it, restructure it. Just learn to cope with the legitimate negative emotions. If you want to dig deeper into that, I'll refer you to episode 36 of the True Life podcast. The title there is, Do You Have Negative Feelings About Wellness? And I can't offer you a full counseling session here. This is just a discovery and management initiative, is what I'll call it. If you were embarking on a road trip, for instance, and had to leave immediately, right now, you got to go. Realize the car brakes, they're okay, but they're just slow to respond. You don't have time to get them fixed. You'd simply adjust for longer stopping distances so as to avoid a wreck, right? Same principle here. If you have a negative feeling about health, you need to be aware and adjust accordingly to manage for the outcome you desire. You may not fix and get rid of that negative emotion. Most often, your negative emotion can be attributed to an incident in or the circumstances of your life that you just need to clarify so you can manage it. That right there is a relevant overview on the concept of relationships we have with ourselves in our lives. And our point is to become aware and better manage them so they don't secretly erode our efforts. So that was our relationship with your health and wellness. Let me give you a bit of insight into the possible relational hurdles that pop up now in the other 6 primary areas where we desire fulfillment. Next one is relationships. Number 2, a crossover of words, of course, but you have a relationship with relationships, with how you view and do relationships. And now I am talking primarily with people, with how you relate to everyone in your life. Most people have distinct patterns of relationship, good and bad. And if you find you're generally happy or critical with people, it says more about you than them. It's you. If you have a long-term or short-term relationships, if you have many friends or just a few close friends or not many friends at all, and it's not across the board. You can absolutely have fairly healthy relationships with one person or some people in your life and very bad relationships with others. But generally, you're going to bring your relational perspectives to relationships with relating to others, to all relationships to some degree. The question then is, how do you feel overall about the relationships in your life? In the case of relationships, you will likely have a barrage of good and bad. Relationships you feel great about, relationships you don't feel so good about. In both cases, however, the question is why? And don't focus on the person. Well, my relationship with that person's bad because they're a jerk. Again, what is it in you? Where you may feel the relationship is great, the motive, the reason why could also still be unhealthy. You got to question that too. Again, we're just trying to get aware out here. I love my relationship, for instance, with my youngest boy, but I'm very aware he is so affectionate. He's so smart. He's so fun. He's so affirming and encouraging. He fills my affirmation, my desires for affirmation and approval, which could be dangerous, for instance, if I'm using him as a surrogate for those things, affirmation and approval, because let's say I wasn't getting them from my wife, and I do. That's literally an analogy. And I'm not making fun of that one, but I'm just aware that, my gosh, who wouldn't love to be with this kid? He makes me feel like $1,000,000. So I would say, oh, I have a healthy relationship. I need to make sure that it's healthy and not a codependent relationship in that arena as well. Um, any relationship with another person is rarely 100% healthy or unhealthy, good or bad, but we want to flesh out the root issues. Again, the most telling truth about our relationships is our history and patterns. If we've always been alone, if we've never made friends, if we've always had lots of friends, I mean, that's where we can look at the patterns. And, we easily recognize, let's say, the tragic pattern of a girl, let's say, who was abused by her father and has a long line of abusive boyfriends and husbands. Many of us are very similar in following patterns like that, maybe not to such an acute point, though. So why do you feel good about certain relationships in your life? Is it a true joy and healthy union, or is it unhealthily filling a wound or a void? And why do you feel bad about certain relationships? Is it truly a toxic person? Is everybody out there toxic and out to get you? Um, and would you be better to just distance yourself from everybody? Or even in that, even in the toxicity is that you perceive from so many people, is it filling a void for you to be a victim? Again, we're getting into deep waters. I'm not a counselor. This is awareness. Some of these things you're going to hear and go, ooh, that strikes a chord, and you're going to need to get deeper with. I mean, we're looking for your feelings regarding relationships. An example, episode 797 of my podcast, The Ziglar Show. I was with Dr. Benjamin Hardy talking about his book, Personality is Not Permanent. In it, we got to talking about me being an introvert and worn out by social engagements, whereas my wife is an extrovert. She gets energy from them. And Ben starts asking me questions. And a big issue that comes out is me realizing how natural my wife is, her behavior, how she acts in social gatherings. She's just herself. She's pretty unfiltered. If she offends somebody, I'm not going to say she doesn't care, but it's just not on her radar. She's just being herself. Just unfiltered. Go with that. However, I don't like conflict. I don't like negative feelings. I want people to like me. I'm not saying this is healthy, folks. This is an admission, okay? This is me being aware of my own junk, my own dysfunction. So when I'm in that social gathering, I am trying, I am striving, I am performing. And who wouldn't be tired from that? No wonder. So what Ben says is, does it have to do that I'm worn out because of my personality style, something I'm a victim towards, or is it because of my propensity to guard myself, my safeguard myself because of some deeper issues? Why am I so afraid to offend people? That's a bigger issue that I should get into. But right now it's just realizing, man, that social engagement, it's going to wear me out because I'm acting. So either don't act or just know that I'm going to wear myself out, but I'm not a victim. I'm not a victim of it. So I view social engagements as tiring. Now I know why at age 49. Well, how do you feel about the close relationships in your life? How do you feel about your relationship with yourself, your spouse, your significant other? Or if you don't have one, maybe you're feeling about that, not having a significant other. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the relationships you have with your extended family, your kids, friends, coworkers, whether that means fellow employees, managers, bosses, or if you're a business owner, your employees and vendors and such? How do you feel? And then why? I mean, get that stuff figured out and on the table. Well, how about this next? Your relationship with your number 3, mental self. Again, that may sound goofy, but it's just the truth. You have a relationship with your mental self, and it's not all couched in your self-image. It's how do you feel about your own mental state, your mental self? Do you think of the mental state of you with positive attributes, such as calm, cool, collected, serene, at peace, composed, hopeful, joyful, abundant? Or on the other side, you think of yourself, seriously, think about how you view yourself, the perspective you have of yourself, as scatterbrained, stressed, freaking out, depressed, despairing, sad, distracted, irritable, scarce. That first one, scatterbrain, my wife got to a point of referring to me somewhat like the absent-minded professor. And I thought, man, that's cool. I got so many brilliant things going on in my life, shooting off like mad. How can I not be absent-minded? And I finally realized, is that really who I want to be? Why can't I be brilliant? I mean, who doesn't want to be brilliant? And also be present and be aware and not be scatterbrained and not be absent-minded. I don't want to be those things again, but I was viewing myself mentally like that. I was embracing, I was agreeing with that. And a lot of these things, how we feel, our relationships, our feelings, our emotions, I want you to take into thought What have I agreed with? Whether somebody else told it to me or whether I told it to myself, what is something, perspective, relationship, feeling, emotion that I have agreed with? I mean, do you feel confident about yourself, okay with you, or do you struggle with self-loathing? I mean, just like relationships, while it's hard to leave any attribute totally behind, we can have some healthy mental states in some roles and environments and unhealthy mental states in others. A classic one is the confident person in the workplace who's a total wreck at home. But they're not fully separated. You can't fully separate those. An overarching question is simply, are you at peace with yourself? Really? And if not, of course, why? You'll not escape this reality. And regarding mental states and viewpoints, there's absolutely no way I can do any remote justice here and now to helping you diagnose and fully treat what it is. This is, again, about your awareness. Your awareness. When I thought about that, I thought about the old quote by R. Taverner: better the devil you know than the devil you don't. I'm taking some liberties to relate it here, but it relates, I can bring it to the point here. Better to know the bad, hard issues and perspectives, lay them out on the table where they can, or where you can keep an eye on them, than to be unaware and let them guide you blindly behind your back, which is my own story in our next segment, which is finances. Another quote you may have most definitely have heard is that money is the root of all evil, right? I don't believe that. Yet I let that be a relationship that I had with money till I got it on the table. Dave Ramsey is a longtime friend of my parents. He was a teacher in my premarital class. My wife and I attended, and I actually don't know, the class was 92, 93. And in it, he talked about money being like a brick. It's just a thing. You can build an orphanage with it, or you can throw it through somebody's window and hate. It's not evil, but what you do with it can be. Well, finances gets a lot of focus for our fears and desires, probably more than it should, as it mainly belies how we just view security and status. It's just a symbol of those things, a tool. Though I'd argue concerns of status are still primarily about security. So I'm going to point it to security. But take the captive topic here, finances, money. How do you feel about it? How do you view it? Happy, sad, confident, fearful, shameful, guilty, or grateful and at peace? And then, of course, why? Why do you feel that way about money? A lot of people say, I hate money. I've said, I hate money. Why do I hate money? Money's just a thing. Why do I hate it? Because I had a bad relationship with it. And you know, what's behind the feeling? It's just a big area for me. It was my downfall. I speak to it in the initial episodes of the Motive podcast, so I won't go super deep again here. I never cared much about making money, which can sound good and bad. In my early years, my dad taught me how to make money, so I was confident in being able to do so, and I was more focused on other things. That sounds okay. Later in life, though, with a wife and kids and homes and cars, my lack of focus on money and having a financial plan was not real helpful. It caused us hurt. And then my experience with some influential businessmen and leaders who, while I honestly think they probably had good intent at heart somewhere there and weren't bad people, I saw that making money and having status eclipsed their true heart to serve people. Gave me a bitterness about it. That was my personal experience, that, you know, my perspective that I witnessed. And I allowed, again, that root of bitterness to grow toward making finances a primary objective of business and being a leader. And yet my heart has always been to be a positive influence on people. If you're sabotaging your own finances and leadership and business, it's not going to succeed ultimately. And I proved this out. I mean, this poor relationship with money derailed so much, and it's a big regret in my life. Even with grace and forgiveness and redemption of some of the wisdom I have today, I hurt people back then. Maybe myself more than any. And I regret it. I regret my blindness. Much of my motive to be here, right here today, delivering these messages is to save you from places I went awry. It weighs on my heart because I planted some poor seeds in my older kids around money. And early seeds are just hard to undo. What's your relationship? How do you feel about money? Number 5 out of 7 here, spiritual. What's your relationship with your spiritual state, your faith? Again, in episode 7 of the Motive podcast here, I talked about the value and necessity of a foundational spiritual component to your life. So I'll refrain from getting into the why of spirituality here. This is, again, just a comment on the impact of our relationship with the spiritual in our lives. For many, the main relationship is, honestly, today, neglect. And as is the case with motive, there's no spiritual want, desire, without a reason. and you'll have to discover your own reason or not. If you've got no motive for a strong spiritual component in your life, then neglect will be your main relationship. I grew up in a traditional church, witnessed about every relationship that there is with this arena. Though, let me point out something vitally important. And this goes alongside, I was going to say this is a side topic, but this is an alignment here because it's going to affect about a lot of the relationships that you have with the spirituality. When I ask most people about their relationship with spirituality, their emotions and their feelings, what I get is a response to their experience of religion, how they feel and view what they've experienced from religion. I grew up in a very religious climate. I know this arena acutely well. To really address spirituality, you'll have to separate it from religion. And that topic is as vast as the universe. Most people can't really even separate them. And many have not been, and then there's a lot of people who haven't been exposed to enough of anything religious or spiritual to even cite a legit relationships. Again, it's just a void. So back to neglect. If this is just a void, go listen to episode 7, decide if you even want a relationship with your spiritual self, your spiritual world. If you do, in fact, have a relationship with your spiritual life, then now's the time to ponder what your feelings are. Do you feel love and connectedness and security and joy spiritually? Or towards anything spiritual, do you feel anger, shame, guilt, hurt, fear, or further, even more detrimental, disdain, anger, even hate? What do you feel and why? Why, or what do you think is the reason for that feeling? And regarding religion, I would say towards religion, I feel a lot of disdain at this point in my life. But spiritually, man, probably the greatest joy and truth and hope and fulfillment that I ever have. And I don't know if you need to hear this, for the sake of context, I'm going to offer it anyways, as whenever I hear people advocate spirituality, which I'm an advocate of it, so I'm very interested in it. But when I hear people talk about it, I want to know what flavor they're talking about, because there's a lot of flavors out there, and religion is saying which flavor is right or wrong. I'm not going to do that, but I want to know where they're coming from, because a lot of times I find that their spirituality has no connection point, and I struggle with that. People will happily tell you what diet they specifically believe in, what exercise, what financial values, and specifics that they espouse in lots of areas with detail, but most get really vague spiritually. So no sales pitch, but I'll be candid. While on my own flavor, while I absolutely reject the religion known as Christianity, I fully embrace Jesus Christ as God and deity. So I'm going to go to the furthest end of the spectrum for most people. And how exactly do I translate and capture that? I mean, the foundation and end all to me is love. And I also admit to having faith in an enemy, a God of darkness by whatever name that you would choose. This faith shapes my life and efforts and my reason for existing. I'll also admit I believe the faith and positive feelings benefit me, whether what I have faith in it was proven to exist or not. So again, the point is, what are your feelings towards spirituality? Know them, get them out on the table, figure out why, and then, of course, what you want to do with them. Next, we have what I refer to, it's number 6, is vocational area of your lives, which is your work, your job, your business, career, that thing with whatever you respond to people asking, so what do you do? We all have a primary work we're engaged in, right? In our everyday life, whether it's with a company in a high rise, out in the forest as a logger, at home as a parent, or in a strip mall running a small business. I mean, this relationship with our work has seen a big decline in my lifetime and in recent decades. The culture has in so many ways reduced our work to little more than a necessary evil in order to pay the bills, which is a massive tragedy. Again, I'm not going to reiterate the value of honorable work that you care about that I covered in episode 7. The point here is relationship. What is your relationship with your daily tasks amongst your revenue producing work? Is it drudgery or joy? Those are two ends of the spectrum, your work, drudgery or joy. And to be candid again, I have some of my greatest joy in my work is thinking on and expressing ideas, trying to influence the world around me with them and creating opportunities. And I mainly do this via writing, which I'm going off of what I wrote. I wrote all this stuff. I'm going off of this right now. But sitting at my desk for hours looking at a screen and typing, I don't consider that fun. I mean, fun's going on a bike ride for me, which I often do around 10:30 a.m. most days to break things up. That's when it's warm out here in the mountains. Speaking into a microphone and on a camera like I'm doing right this second. It's not fun for me. It's not drudgery, but it's not fun in and of itself. Doing my shows with guests and co-hosts is more fun because I do like the conversation. I say it's more fun. It's more enjoyable, but again, it's still not fun. It's not play. It's still work, but it's work I care about and believe in, and it's worth doing. It's worth the effort. But for me, it's not play. I have other things I do for just play. It's not all fun, but it's what I believe in and find some of my greatest fulfillment in. So again, how do you feel about your work? Is it good, bad, honorable, anxious, peaceful, bitter, grateful? I actually find a lot of people who feel a lot of ambivalence about their work. It's not terrible, but it's not great. Works fine. Maybe it beats boredom. It's just what you do. I mean, since age 5 or so, we've all been leaving our homes in the morning, coming home in the late afternoon, first for school and then college and work. And I mean, you are with other people there. Maybe you have some enjoyable relationships and some tasks that are okay, but it's just what you do. No big feelings, no big relationship that you perceive. The question then is, are you okay with that? And we spend an awful lot of time at school and work. It absolutely shapes our lives. I mean, how do you want to spend so much time feeling a certain way? That's a sore spot for me, or an acute issue for me. If I spend so much time at work, how am I feeling during that time? It affects me to the core. It's going to permeate everything about me, my very soul. It can't not. Time builds or erodes us according to what we're exposed to over the course of it. Hear that again. Time builds or erodes us according to what we are exposed to over the course of it. It can't not. It matters. How do you feel about your work? And then why? What's the reason you feel that way? And then what do you want to do about it? Last category here is personal. It's number 7, but I need to clarify how I'm defining it in this format. And it's this way. Your personal life, I'm talking about in regards to the things you do to be fully you, that are just for you. In my bi-monthly, twice a month habits episodes on the Ziglar Show, I ask my guests to talk about their hobbies, their personal pursuits, aside from work, and sometimes even aside from family, their self-care also. And again, I covered the value of investing in this aspect of our lives in episode 7. So here then is how we feel in the world of aspiring people, which you are by proxy of listening to this show. I find that a common relationship and feeling towards personal pursuits is guilt. When your focus and heart is to pour out and serve others and be of value and meaning to the world, you can feel selfish to take time away for yourself. And I get it, man, but as of this writing, I have been fully away from my family for 6 full days and nights. I was in a cabin alone, only a few miles away, but I was alone. I've written a lot. I've done some great runs and mountain bike rides every day. I've had a lot of fun, honestly. I've watched some great movies, finished a really incredible book from a lady I want to have on one of my shows. And even though I know better, though, I still struggle with guilt a little bit. I actually just texted my family thanking them, but they know it makes me a better Kevin that serves them all well. So I know, I'm aware, I'm out there and I'm dealing with it by doing it, even though I still know that a little guilt suckers back there a little bit. I'm actually going home after this recording for an hour to repack, then heading away on a 3-day getaway for my wife. That's an investment in our marriage. So I got an investment in me, investment in my marriage. Then I'll go back home for months to be with my family. And I'm going to go home right in time for Thanksgiving. We'll have a week or more. I'll probably spend 75% or more of it with my family, playing games and jumping on the trampoline and playing Frisbee golf and eating and laughing and just having a grand old time. And I'll do it better because it's from the wellspring of my soul that's been refilled with some quality personal time. I know a lot of people with hobbies and experiences that they frequently engage in who feel absolute joy in them. I love talking with these people about what they do. It's inspiring. I can see the joy radiate from them. And I know even talking about it makes them a better person for humanity. So how do you feel about personal activities you engage in outside of work? Many people do things, as I do, that are encompassed in these personal activities with their families. That's great. But if you do things outside of your family, as I do, and I think it's really good to even have something outside of your family just for you. How do you feel about it? The things, again, you do just for you. Is it guilt or is it joy? And I could list more feelings, emotions in our relationship with our personal endeavors here. But really, those two right there, those are the ends of the spectrum. And I'm going to say most people are going to fall pretty solidly on both sides. They feel mainly guilt or mainly joy. And a lot of people don't feel guilt about them because they don't do them because of guilt. All right. So where do you fit? The relationships we have, to wrap up, folks, in all these areas of our lives with ourselves in relation to them are dramatically significant. For some of you listening, it won't be enough to just become aware. Some of you, in fact, won't be able to become truly aware because of the trauma you've encountered in some of these areas. So I must say again, this isn't a counseling center. I'm not a counselor. We're not engaging in clinical therapy here. It's up to you to discern how you deal with this. If you need to go down the rabbit hole, do so. The point is awareness of the issue and the power it will continue to have in sabotaging your efforts if you don't deal with it. If you do need to go deeper with this, man, I am a huge fan of counseling, therapy, coaching, whatever you want to call it. To me, the question is not when do you ever need outside help, but rather when do you not? I think we all should be getting guidance in our lives. The goal is to have healthy relationships in each of the 7 areas of life that we desire fulfillment in. Healthy relationships. And using human relationships as an avatar, I'd say almost all the relationships in my life have a fair level of health, but they are by no means equal, and I have no desire or intent for them to be. Neither will my relationships be equal regarding these 7 areas that we just talked about, but they must be healthy enough for me to make positive progress and achieve a level of fulfillment that I desire. Like with finances, I don't know if I'll ever overcome somewhat of a disdain for dealing with money and finances, but I know it's there. I know it's not healthy, and now I've hired a lot of people to help me in my business, to help me deal with my finances so that I can have success in that area. That's the goal we all want to have in our relationships with all the areas in our lives.